Yeah, let's get into Carolina then, because if I'm reading the room correctly, I think we all have Carolina at number 2. So, Case, why don't you just kick it off then?
Yeah, initially when I wrote my rankings, I did have Carolina at number 1. And it was when I got to the Devils and I started looking through where I kind of changed the tune. But this team's still going to be so good. And they still have, kind of the main core together and one of the best defense cores in the league. And I think even improved over last year, which, I didn't think was possible. So, I kind of always have been doubting this team offensively over the last few years. And maybe I'm rightfully doing that since they were 15th last year. But, they still succeed. And they were missing a guy like Svechnikov for a good chunk of the season. And Pacioretty was missing for the most of the season. And they were able to bring in some guys that are going to be chipping in. And Seth Jarvis is going to be scoring more. So I kind of have settled down on the doubting of the offense of the Carolina Hurricanes, especially when they're just so good defensively and, they're going to keep the puck out of the net and win close games. And it's easy to win close games when you have maybe the best coach in the NHL who has really made this team into, a powerhouse the last few years. If they could get by a conference finals, then yeah, they're a Stanley Cup contender for sure. So what I'm really interested in heading into the season is what's going to happen in net. I think that, Anderson and Ranta are both 2 aging goalies that have struggled with injuries in the past and consistency. There's times that, Anderson looked like one of the best goalies in the league. And then at other times he was kind of absent back there. And I'm interested to see what they're going to do with that, combined with the fact that they kind of have a 3-headed monster going on here. They have Kochetkov as well, who was he was decent last year. He looked good. He looked like he could be a backup in the NHL. So interesting to see what they're going to do with him. I think he's waiver exempt, which gives them some flexibility. But also, I don't know if they're going to be interested in doing that because they don't have an AHL team anymore. So if they loan him to the AHL, it's going to be with someone else's team. And then the playing time is not up to them. So do you send him down to the AHL to get playing time and then he sits on the bench with some other team's AHL team? I don't know. It's an interesting situation. And, I think that's going to make or break even them being in second place or third place. Do the Rangers pass them if their goaltending fails them? So I'm interested to see what Carolina is going to do. I know they're going to be a playoff team. I think they're going to be right on the Devil's ass all year. And, it's going to be 1 or 2 points between the two.
Yeah, well said. I agree with a lot of what you said. Going back to the goaltending talk, I really like the fact that they have all 3 guys coming back this year. I didn't anticipate that at all. I thought one guy would be out the door and Kochetkov would be the 1B or maybe even the 1A because he had such a great season last year. But you brought it up, the fact that he is waiver exempt, who knows what happens there. It makes it a bit easier for the team to clear cap space if that's what they need to do. Even though it's not an ideal situation, they could do that if they need. Right now, just looking at Cap Friendly, they have about almost $1 million in projected cap space, but that's with Svechnikov on the IR. So something has to give. A few players are going to have to go down. If Kochetkov's one of them, I wouldn't be shocked just given his status, but I guess we'll have to see. But just talking about this team in general, I think their forward group got better. Adding Bunting and Jarvis is another year older as well. Obviously adding Bunting and then Jarvis being on the team for a while and is another year older. I think that's going to be really great for them in terms of getting extra goals, because something that we've always talked about is this is a team that could just use an easy goal. And Harper, I know that's a quote that you like to bring up from Rod the Bod, because it's true. This team has perpetually been in this situation where they play this great system and they're so great defensively and they get goals throughout the lineup, but they kind of lack that star power. So it's hard to sort of get an easy one. But I'm confident that this forward group will be just as good as last year, if not better. And then on defense, adding Orlov, who is the biggest fish in the offseason, and DeAngelo, who I know a lot of teams in the league wouldn't even think about touching, but he's still a pretty damn good player. I think he was a mid 40-point player last year, and he's going to be playing on their third pair more than likely. So that defense group is just insane. They're going to get so much offense from the back end. I'm not worried about offense for this team at all. I think they are a perennial Stanley Cup contender, and we'll see what happens in this division. I landed on number 2 just because I like the Devils more, but like you mentioned, Case, 1 point separated these two teams last year, and 1 point actually separated the Maple Leafs from this team last year. So it's the same song and dance this season, and we'll see what happens, but it's going to be an exciting race, that's for sure.
I hope it's 1 and 2 Devils Carolina, because I don't want to face them in the first round.
Yeah,
because they do turn it on in the playoffs, you know.
Yep. Yeah, they sure do. I do think these two teams that we're starting off with, New Jersey and Carolina, are kind of interchangeable. I could see one or the other finishing at the top of the division, but I do favor the Devils just a smidge over this team. But look, I mean the Canes are loaded as well, and a very, very deep team, and especially that blue line. Like we've been talking for years about how good this blue line is, and it's like, oh, they add Brent Burns. Great first season last year, and was a dark horse pick for the Norris Trophy. He was that good. Brett Pesce is still there. We wonder about his future, but for right now, looks like he's sticking around, and he's going to start the season with the Canes. Orlov on a short-term deal. D'Angelo is back in the mix, Slavin and Shea. So they're loaded on the back end as usual. They added some snarl up front in Michael Bunting. I mean, I think a player like that is going to fit right in with how Rod Brind'Amour likes his team to play and his system and all of that. Martin Necas took a huge step forward last year in becoming an elite player in this league. Getting Svechnikov back healthy and ready to go is going to be huge for this team once again. And a couple of very underrated players in the bottom six. Martinook, what a postseason he had. Stefan Nason as well. There's a former Devil for you, Case. He's fit in so well with this team. So it's a very similar looking group with some nice ads to just give them that extra oomph. And yes, we've said this many times that the style of play that Rod likes to play kind of suppresses the offense, I think, a little bit. But this team is still going to score a bunch, and they're very deep and they're a contender. But yeah, that's the one question for me is, can this team finally win when they get to the Final Four? And we'll see if they even get there. But I think that the Devils and the Hurricanes are going to be arm wrestling all year long for the top spot in this division.